Hello beautiful creatures, welcome back to the next installment in the Your First Repaint series. Today we are going to be talking all things hair. Giving your new doll new hair can really elevate its characterization and help bring to life your vision, and there are so many ways and options to do this. In today's video we're going to be talking about synthetic hair, not wool hair, but if you guys do want a video on that, let me know and I will do a full in-depth dive on wool hair as well. So let's jump in and start talking about giving your doll new hair. The first thing we're going to talk about is the rerooting tool. Rerooting is the most traditional and common way of giving your doll new hair. It involves this hand drill piece and a needle to press the doll hair into the head. So looking at this hand drill, it is a classic hand drill piece that you could pick up at the hardware store. It has two head sizes for bigger drill pieces, but in our case, bigger needle pieces or smaller needle pieces. This is important because depending on the hair choice you choose, you're going to choose different needle sizes to accommodate that size of the hair and the type of the hair. So having that variability in this tool is really helpful. Now when it comes to needle choices, most of the time, whether you purchase them or make them yourself, you're going to be using long-eyed sewing needles to create your needle end of the rerooting tool. Typically, I like to use tapestry needles for larger sections and then use a small traditional sewing needle for the smaller sections. Here I'm showing you what a long-eyed versus a traditionally smaller-eyed sewing needle looks like next to each other. You can see that if you were to cut the smaller one, you're going to end up with a really small fork for your needle, whereas if you use the longer eye ones, you're going to have more space for your hair and you can have more thicker plugs. Personally, I buy my needles from the sewing shop and then I cut them using my sharp-ended pliers to create that forked needle that I can use to plug the hair. Here I'm just going to show you how I do that. I cut on a slanted angle so that one of the hooks is going to be slightly longer than the other. This just helps me press through the plugged head so that I can get the hair in there without snapping the needle. Once the needle is cut, I then add it to my drill piece and tighten it in so that it is securely held so it's not going to bend or snap with pressure, and then I'm ready to go. You're only going to use this tool if you're doing a partial or full reroot, but first of all, let's talk about pre-wefts, which does not require you having a rerooting tool. I find that pre-wefted hair is the most beginner friendly because rerooting is extremely time consuming and can be quite difficult to learn, and you can go through a lot of needles snapping them and breaking them on your journey to learning the perfect technique. So I find pre-wefted hair to be really beginner friendly, and it's the most cost effective because you can cheaply pick it up on AliExpress. Most of the time, pre-wefted hair is going to be nylon hair, which is shinier and slipperier, and in this case with milk silk hair, softer, but you can get thicker, denser, crispier hair qualities as well on AliExpress. It's really personal preference, and I will link down below the options that I use. The simplest way of attaching pre-wefted hair is to glue it directly onto the doll head, which is the method I still use when I use pre-wefted hair, and most of the time pre-wefted hair is wefted with a similar colored cotton, which means you won't be able to see it necessarily really contrasted on the head and will disguise easily into the nylon. But you can also use certain techniques to disguise and hide the wefts once you've added this to the head. So now let's talk about some of the fibers you might run into when you begin your rerooting journal. Saran is the most traditional and classic and I think most preferred fiber that doll customizers go for. This is because unlike nylon, there's a bit of grip and a bit of greasiness to the texture of Saran. So rerooting with it is a lot easier as it doesn't slip around so much, and it has more of a mattified shine. Saran has so many different color options, and a lot of the time it is blended with other hair fibers to make it easier to use those ones. Like a lot of the time you can get a Saran and nylon blend or a Saran and Synatra blend that is going to have that same kind of texture and make it easier to work with. Now, my personal preference is Synatra hair fibers. This I get from Custom Doll Hair AU. It is the first fiber that I used when I began rerooting, and it is my absolute favorite. It has a shininess similar to nylon, still has that greasiness that is most associated with Saran, and it is just kind of the dream hair quality to work with. It's harder to come by in the market. I don't know if this is because it's a newer fiber or if other people don't prefer it as much or what, but I picked mine up at Custom Doll Hair AU, and what I love about Custom Doll Hair AU is that they have so many different weights and lengths available for you to choose from. When working with Monster High, you're traditionally going to want to get 18 inches and 50 grams of hair. This will do a whole head rerooted. You might even have some left over. I can make 30 grams work and shorter and longer lengths work, but it's really personal preference and style. Fuller hairstyles are gonna need more hair, and then tied up hairstyles, pigtails, you can work with less. But when you're starting out, I really suggest 50 grams of 18 inch. Another great option is nylon. You can pick this up for really cheap on AliExpress or go for a higher quality nylon on Etsy. The great thing about nylon is it's very high shine, it's slipperier, it's softer, and it doesn't have that greasy texture that you might find with Saran. Because nylon is slipperier, I prefer to use it in a blend with either Synatra or Saran because it kind of gives it this more workable texture that is easier to reroot with. Nylon has great color variations too. You can do fantasy colors or natural colors. There's really no limit with nylon, and it is probably the most accessible to us. However, if you are starting out, nylon can be a bit slippery and tangle quite easily, so it might not be your first choice for your first ever reroot. And in the nylon family, there's a bit of a game changer that has just recently come to at least the customizing market called Kiwi Nylon. It has this kind of almost gritty texture, like your finger could catch on it. It's got more grip than traditional nylon while still having that beautiful shine. I haven't personally worked heaps with Kiwi Nylon, but it is an industry favorite and people do use it now more so with customizing over traditional nylon, so there's that, and it might be a better choice for first-time nylon users. And depending on your characterization, you might want to go for a protective style or a textured style of hair. These come from bases of nylon, polypropylene, all kinds of bases, but you can get micro braids, micro twist, curls, afro-esque curls, like all kinds of textured and protective hairstyles are available for doll customizing. It doesn't just have to be like super Eurocentric, long hair, straight hair. You do have options available to you. And so it is important to think about the characterization of your doll when you go ahead and choose hair textures and qualities and what you're looking for to create that story with your doll. There are 3 main types of hair replacement that you can use during customization. Even if you're not using a synthetic hair, if you're using wool or ribbons or things like that, you're still going to do either a reroot, a partial reroot, or pre-wefted hair. The first technique I'm going to show you guys is partial reroot, because partial reroot includes both rerooting and using pre-wefted hair. So when you select your head, you want to look for one that has a similar hairline just to keep it easy for you. You can of course change a doll's hairline, a doll's parting, all that good stuff, but it is a little more tricky. When I personally do reroots, I like to start at the very outer point, so the hairline along the front and the back, and then the more denser areas like around ears if there's ears, and then I just follow all of the holes that are there from the previous plugs. For my partial reroot today, I'm going to be using this Twyla head. She has really nice dense hairline and a middle parting, which is my preferred when I'm doing a partial reroot and pre-weft together. From her factory plugs, she does have some damage to that center part where some of the holes are really big, and so I will be using a tapestry needle when I go in to do her middle parting, just so that I can plug more hair into those bigger holes. Besides that, the head is looking good. I'm not going to paint it because it is a partial reroot, not a full reroot, so I'm going to leave it the factory color and I'm ready to go. Now I use these finger covers to keep my fingers safe when I'm using my reroot tool. This is just my personal preference and my method. And then what I do is I grab a chunk from the weft of hair and I place it over my finger in half, because half of the length is how much I'm going to have for the length of the doll hair. And then using the reroot tool, I pick up a small plug, probably the length of the eye of the needle, and then I just separate it from that chunk. And this is exactly how my hand is shaped, over and under like that. and then I just plug it into the head. With a partial reroot, you're just going to go around the hairline and the center parting or side parting or whatever kind of parting you've chosen for the doll hair. So I'm just going to do this method heaps and heaps and heaps until the hairline and the center parting is full of new plugged hair. So with the hairline complete, I did use a thinner needle than I'm going to use for my middle parting. So I'm going to go ahead and change my needle to a larger tapestry needle so that I can fill those bigger plugs. This is optional, you don't have to change to a larger needle. You can use the same thin needle and just pack heaps of plugs into the same space to create full hairline. But personally, I find it easier and prefer to take bigger plugs with a bigger needle and do like quicker and more in a short amount of time. As I go, I like to split the parting because the hair is like an 18-inch halved into a U shape for my plugs. Means it's going to be 9 inches each side, and so I go ahead and split that U in half and keep the parting as it will fall when the doll's hair is set. With the hairline and the middle parting all complete, it's time to move on to pre-wefted hair. I'm using pre-wefts from AliExpress, really nice soft nylon and a really similar color to the rooted hair that I've done. And then just using my favorite 450 glue that you would have seen me talk about in my supplies video, I'm gonna go ahead and glue this onto the head, making sure I don't stick any glue on the plugs that I've just done and just fit it in kind of like a puzzle. The closer I get to the middle parting is when I begin to make my wefts shorter in length and then packing them closer and denser as we reach the top, and then pressing one just almost touching along the hair middle parting so that when it falls it's completely covered. Before setting the hair as well, I'm just going to go ahead and use some 450 glue to seal all those plugs in and mash it up with the end of a paintbrush so that all of the hair pieces get covered that are inside the doll head. I got really lucky with this reroot, meaning I don't need to use hot water to set it, but if I was going to, this is where I would use hot water to set that parting and set the hair flatter on the head. If you would like a video all on heat styling with synthetic hair, I can do another dedicated video to that, just let me know down below. And here I'm just showing you guys a full reroot in which I didn't use any wefted hair, it's all full plugs. This is a really good way to give yourself versatility when you come to styling. You can tie it up and do different kind of cool hairstyles because there is a fuller, denser hair and you're not hiding any wefts. But technique is the same as a partial, just all the way around all of the plugs rather than stopping and using wefts. Moving on to pre-wefted hair, I like to use pre-wefted hair after completing my face up since it's going to involve glue and kind of be trickier to push back and create a blank canvas around the face for your Mr. Super Clear. Whereas if I'm doing a full reroot or partial reroot, I will do that prior to doing my face up. But when it comes to pre-wefted hair, I simply put my 450 glue on and then I go round and around in a circle with my pre-wefted hair. This is kind of tricky to film because your hands are always in the way, which is why I kind of leave it out of most of my full videos when I am doing a custom, just because it is so finicky, there's glue everywhere, it involves pinning the hair in place, and it just isn't really that fun to watch. But basically there's two options when you do pre-wefted hair. This one where you go round and around in a circle, creating a circle at the crown of the head, or cutting them in length of the head shape and then having a middle seam that you could cover with a hat or a headband or something like that. The circle method is my preferred method if I'm doing a middle parting or something like that, whereas I'll use the seamed version when I do a fringe, for example. But with that, we're at the end of our little dedicated video to all things synthetic doll hair. I hope you guys learned something and found this useful if you are approaching your first custom and needed some help and guidance. I can't wait to show you guys the next video, whenever that may be, and I can't wait to see you guys back here so soon with more crafts and more curios.